Everybody to this, I think it's the third Operations and Performance Committee meeting of this triennium, and a big welcome to our guests from Horizons and NZTA. We will start with a Karakia. E oha ki ronga ki a Whanganui, e oha ki raro ki a Papatuanuku. Turakina ngā mea kina ki te pai ātia. Uia mai a korowai aroha, he tonga mā mātou, ka puta ki te wai ao ki te ao marama, humie, huie, tai kie. I acknowledge, greet those things above, the sky, universe and heavens. I acknowledge, greet those things below, the earth in its entirety. Cast all negativity to the distant horizons. Cover us with the cloak of affection and love as a treasure bestowed upon us so we may enter into enlightenment. Let it be bound and fixed. Yes, fixed. Let it be agreed by all. And when I arrived this morning a little early, there was Waiata practice going on in here. It was really quite lovely to hear. So we are going to now sing our Waiata. Erere. If you want to. If our three leads, we've now got a third lead. Thank you. Yeah, we're getting better and better. And for those familiar with the room, you'll see there's a slight change in configuration, and our presenters will be presenting from the table with us as opposed to in the dock at the end. So, apologies. We have an apology from Deputy Mayor Councillor Helen Craig, Councillor Charlie Anderson, and from Rural Community Board member Judd Bailey. I'm happy to move. Who'd like to second? Thanks, Charlotte. No leaves of absence. Declarations of interest. Do we have any of those?
Sorry, you need to say it's carried.
Carried.
Oh, well, what is it?
All those in favour? Carried. Declarations of interest, none. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. We don't really have a late item, we just have that presentation that was sent late last evening. Confirmation of minutes.
Excuse me, can we get a move and second of the additional information? Number 4, just we need a move and second.
Do we? Oh.
I'm happy to move that the additional information be accepted.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Confirmation of minutes. Do we have any issues with the minutes, or can I just have a mover for those? Thank you, Councillor Rob, and seconded Councillor Pete. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. So a big welcome to our guests today from Horizons and from Waka Kotahi, and we've got Sarah O'Hagan is going to open the item before our speaker. Yeah, brief introduction.
Morning, committee. So we welcome our guests here online from Waka Kotahi and in the room from Horizons to talk about a couple of things, but broadly speaking, the Whanganui public transport plan. We'll hear some updates from both teams around where we're at with that board strategy for Whanganui. So without further ado, I will hand over, and we're going to Zoom first. So Kathryn, you can hear us loud and clear?
Yes.
All right, over to you, Kathryn. Thank you.
Kia koutou katoa, ko Kathryn King toku ingoa. I'm the Urban Mobility Manager at Waka Kotahi. Can you hear me all right?
Perfect.
Wonderful. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there today. We're working in quite restricted travel policies at the moment, and it's much harder for us to get around. So I'm very appreciative of you making time for us and the ability for us to join via Zoom. I have a few slides to go through. I will try and, oh, it looks like I can't share my screen. Don't know if there's anyone who's
working on it.
Thank you. Otherwise, I'm very happy to just talk through what I was going to say. I was asked to give a little bit of context to our priorities at Waka Kotahi and the direction from the government that we're currently delivering on. We're working to some really ambitious targets around emission reduction that I'm sure you're all familiar with. And in particular, our focus area is around reducing the dependency we have in many of our towns and cities on driving, and making it far more possible for people to make the choice to get public transport, to walk and cycle for those journeys where it makes sense for people. And we've been really impressed by the leadership that we've seen displayed by Whanganui District Council and by Horizons. While a lot of the effort needs to come from our bigger cities, where the amount of driving happening is higher, it's really important that we see everyone playing their part in the big effort we need to make around emission reduction. So we're very appreciative of the leadership that you are displaying. We have a lot of plans underway. There's a plan that's in development now around vehicle kilometres travelled reduction, so tackling the light vehicle traffic. We have recently published a plan for cycling and have a plan for walking underway, and a public transport plan. And all of those as...
Excuse me, Kathryn, you can actually share now, I believe.
Oh, wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you. There we go. Can everyone see that?
It's small, but we can see it, and we have hard copies.
Wonderful. So this is demonstrating those plans I was talking about that are setting the direction nationally for the focus on public transport, the focus on walking and cycling, and enabling that to happen. And that flows through to some of the programs that we have launched in the last couple of years. It was wonderful to have Whanganui in our first launch of the Innovating Streets program, and brilliant to have you back for the Streets for People program, the next iteration of it. We really were impressed by the work that you carried out on Drews Avenue last year, and we're hearing really wonderful things about what you are aiming to achieve there on Guyton Street. So I'm really looking forward to at some point coming and experiencing that. I brought my son down last year to look at Drews Avenue, and he had great fun with your table with the marble games and playing ping pong, and really I can see how that's made a difference for people. And then just to briefly mention the current focus for us, and the vehicle that the government has at the moment makes sure that councils across the country have the funding that they need to deliver on this ambition. To give people more choice in the way they're travelling, and the Transport Choices program has been our opportunity to see quick changes in our towns and cities across the country. So there's just over a year left now in that program, and it's investing $350 million across the country, and a real focus on the short to medium length journeys that are the big opportunity for us to transition to walking, cycling, public transport. And wonderful to see the leadership that you're showing with Te Ngaru, and such a great demonstration of an integrated approach to transport there, with cycling and walking accessibility to the bus stops and the new bus service itself. So that was a quick run through of our priorities and our appreciation of what you have happening. I wondered if I can answer any questions.
We do have a question from Councillor Michael.
Kia ora. With Waka Kotahi 30-year plan, is there any scope for innovative public transport? And the reason why I say that is because Whanganui is a fantastic place to trial any innovation ideas. We're a flat city with lots of sunshine and a welcoming community. So when I worked with you guys a couple of years ago, we did talk about smaller autonomous solar-powered vehicles for public transport. Has that pushed forward? And are you anywhere near a trial? And can I talk to people about that more?
Certainly. We have a innovation fund that has been supporting some projects across the country. That has gone through 2 rounds of funding. The latest one's actually around transitioning freight to low carbon freight, but there'll be another one coming up soon. The government focus for public transport at the moment is very much in getting the basics right, making sure we can get the drivers we need, make sure that the cost of public transport isn't a barrier to people, and that we have the ability to run the frequency and services that we need for public transport. But we're very open to the opportunity for improvement, and trials is a big part of the department that I work in. Multimodal innovation is very much looking at what we can do to support innovation across the country. So that innovation fund would be a good opportunity.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Kate.
Thank you, Kathryn. We're very appreciative of the support that we've had from Waka Kotahi in terms of Streets for People, and you've commented on what we've achieved in conjunction with yourselves down at Drews Avenue, and we're really looking forward to what we're going to achieve in Guyton Street and St Hill Street. It seems that Waka Kotahi is investing a significant sum nationally in this initiative, and I think you said it's got a year to go. Can you talk to us a little bit about the evaluation that you've got planned?
Certainly. Streets for People has a really comprehensive evaluation program that has been set up to look at a number of aspects in terms of project evaluation as well as programs. So we're wanting to understand the impact of trials on picking up the pace of change and making sure we best meet community needs. That's a large part of the evaluation. We're looking at whether this investment is making a difference at a council level within senior management, elected officials and council officers working on projects. And at a project level, whether these are making a difference in terms of creating streets that are more welcoming to more people, that enable more people to walk, more people to cycle, and and utilise public transport. So there's several levels that we're evaluating at the program through to the projects, and those there's a full report of Innovating Streets last year on our website, and we'll be doing something similar for Streets for People.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you, Kathryn. Are you, Mayor Andrew?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure whether this is the right forum to ask this, but I'm interested in, you talked about a multimodal transport, and I'm very interested in how we get people and products in and out of Whanganui to neighbouring regions, to around New Zealand and actually around the world. And from a public transport perspective, I've seen on my desk a bit about a train service to Wellington, and but what do you propose would be the next step for Whanganui to review its public transport so that we can connect Whanganui and New Zealand, or connect Whanganui to the rest of New Zealand?
Oh, wonderful. We have within the department I work in, there is a public transport team who are focused on enabling councils to pick up their public transport networks and services, and also a rail team with the focus on interregional rail and freight. So we can, after this meeting, make sure people have the right connections into those teams so they can tap into the capability in those teams and understand particularly the funding opportunities that are imminent.
Thank you.
Councillor Glenda.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just looking at the investment of the 350 million for high impact projects nationally. I'm wondering how that's divvied up. Is that divvied up regionally, or is that just a big pot of money that whoever has the most amazing project with a great business case gets it? How much of it is spent already?
So all of that allocation is now out in councils across the country. There's 46 councils who've received funding through the program. The Minister Wood and Minister Robertson, who are the approvers of that fund, they were very keen to see a really good regional spread. So there's more councils achieving, or more councils have received funding through that program than we do with our typical National Land Transport program. And it's coupled with a whole lot of support and, for example, media and comms support and design reviews and so forth. So 46 councils and a real focus on our on making sure everyone has the opportunity to advance their projects and programs. I would say the places that had good plans in place already, so good town centre plans, good public transport or walking and cycling plans, were able to demonstrate their ability to deliver faster to those plans, and they tended to be the ones that have received the higher investment. So the good planning that you have in place really paid off for this fund.
Thank you. Councillor Philippa.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure if it's the right place to ask this as well, but you know, with budget 2023, I guess, or released today, and with what would be expected to, you know, global or climate change, I think, you know, is obviously going to be a priority with everything that's going on around our roads and, you know, East Coast, Auckland. Do you, you know, crystal ball gazing, but do you see, you know, money being pushed into other areas out of some of this public transport, or increase, or any advice for us how we can get our fair share of the pie, to keep connecting our communities, you know, help the climate change fight, etc.
That's a great question. What we've seen in the budget announcement today is a real focus on getting, as I mentioned before, our public transport services working well. There's a lot of priority in that budget for driver wages and conditions, increasing services, and the Community Connect announcement, enabling more people in lower socioeconomic households to access public transport, and rightly, as you point out, there's a priority for repairing and ensuring there's access in those communities that have been really cut off by the climate events earlier this year. Our understanding is that that focus will continue, and the government is looking for us to, with the next government policy statement on transport, to ensure that all investment is going further, and that's seeing us now look at, with, for example, our maintenance programs, what can we do to enable improvements or standard improvements happen through those programs, so that not just our improvement funding, but also maintenance funding is tackling emission reduction. So we're anticipating a call from the government to make all investment work harder.
Thank you. If I could just go a fraction further, I guess it's just, I read things like in the budget this year around, there's a note around this public transport fund, and that Waka Kotahi's 5.7 million into, I guess, is higher than expected, or slightly higher due to the current half price fares. And I guess, going back in years, there's been a real investment into roads of national significance, and I guess our fight for getting more funding, and and these big these big issues happening in the East Coast and Auckland, for example. I just in brief, our ratepayers can't afford to carry too much of the burden around public transport and roading resilience. So I think it was kind of around that advice to am I right in you're telling us you think there's going to be increased investment into all areas, including regional communities?
I don't have visibility of what priority we'll see in terms of regions. What I can say is all investment is that councils will receive in the next National Land Transport Program, and any Crown investment that is committed, where we'll need to demonstrate how it's reducing emissions. So all investment, maintenance, renewals, improvements, public transport services is very focused on our emission reduction targets. But I don't have any information to share with you about priorities regionally.
Thank you, Kathryn. Are you able to remain for the rest of the presentation in case there's questions later?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And now over to our Horizons team, if you'd like to join us at the table. Push the right-hand button. And can I please ask that you bring it quite close to you, because the feedback we get from people online is that we don't speak close enough to our speakers.
Kia ora koutou. Firstly, just thank you very much for welcoming us here today, making us feel comfortable in your space here. Your Karakia and your Waiata we're beautiful this morning, so thank you very much for that. So I'm Mark Reid, I'm Transport Manager at Horizons Regional Council. We've got a bit of a presentation to go through as well in a minute, but I'll just hand over to Sam Fergusson, who's our Passenger Transport Committee Chair and Horizons elected member, just to provide a brief introduction.
Kia ora koutou, ko Sam Fergusson, tōku ingoa. And as Mark said, one of the councillors at Horizons and chair the Passenger Transport Committee. And I think just acknowledging the work over the last couple of years with Whanganui, the joint approach to transport planning and getting the tide up and running. It's been a really positive approach, and I think just hearing some of the questions around the table, the eye to the future. Looking forward to being part of that conversation with you about what the future holds for Whanganui and those regional connections.
Great, so I see our presentation's up. So I also know that's in your agenda, so if you can't see that, then I won't dwell too much on the words that's in there. But next slide. Or else. Yeah. So the first slide talks about our regional public transport plan. And so our passenger transport committee last year signed off an update to our regional public transport plan. And so on that sits councillors from across our region. So Anthony Tonnen is the Whanganui representative on that committee. Thank you. And that actually set some really quite ambitious targets for public transport in the region over the next 10 years. So things like a 300% increase in public transport patronage is really future focused and looking at where we might be able to get to in the years to come across our public transport, not just in Whanganui but across the region. I don't know if this is going to work or not.
That's very strange.
I mean, it's in front of everyone, I assume, so I can just keep talking. Yeah. So, next slide talks about some of our passenger transport services, just at a very high level across the region. Oh.
I figured I'd move it. You said next slide.
Yeah, next slide then. Next slide as well. Thanks. And really just provides a little bit of view as to where Whanganui sits. And to your question, Mayor Andrew, before around regional and inter-regional services, as part of the regional public transport plan, one of the key sort of reviews that Horizon is looking at undertaking is around those regional services and inter-regional services. So not just how might Whanganui connect to Palmerston North, but how might Whanganui connect to Taranaki or other parts of the region, or be part of that link. And at the stage that's focusing more on, say, bus rather than passenger rail, but perhaps there are other opportunities still in the future around that. So that will definitely be working closely with the Passenger Transport Committee, and definitely keen to work very closely with individual councils around how you might see your communities best served through those services in the future as well. Next slide. So this is just briefly on how Horizon's transport is funded, and the biggest part of that is public transport. And you can see that a good portion of it is through Kotahi and rates. So we rate directly. So any improvements to say Whanganui public transport gets rated to our Whanganui ratepayers. So it's not spread equally. Whanganui ratepayers aren't paying for a service in Palmerston North or elsewhere. So I know there's been a little bit of discussion around the tide service, and I think it was great that Whanganui District Council was able to show some leadership going into the last LTP to help fund those improvements around that tide service. I think there's a good discussion to be had around where that should sit going forward into future LTPs, whether that sits as a spread or whether it comes to Horizons individually as the one who's delivering that. I think that that may have been a question that was posed to our chair, Rachel, at your annual plan submission a week or two ago. So look, we're really open to those conversations as we look forward to the LTP, but also really thank you for, I guess, continuing to be a part of moving forward in Whanganui and public transport, and really be able to keep things going forward. Next slide, I'll talk a little bit more specifically about some of the things that we heard and that we're seeing from the tide. So last year, ahead of the tide being launched, we did some community feedback, and this was reported to council towards the middle of last year. So that a couple of graphs snipped there, which are probably very small on the screen and might even be very small on your paper, really highlight some of the things that the community felt were missing or perhaps lacking in public transport. And some of the things we heard was around frequency and accessibility of bus services, how they get information, how those things, I guess, have really driven where we're looking at improvements in public transport in Whanganui. One of those is around the Tide, new service which launched in February, and those graphs on the right, I hope really demonstrate the success that that's had over the first sort of 2.5, 3 months of that service. We've seen in across March and April that service carry almost 50% of all patronage on our public transport service in the city, and that has come at almost very little reduction in patronage across our other services. So it's not just taking away; it's adding to those services, and it's to date been, I guess, a really good vindication for all the work that went in around that service. And again, a lot of advocates within this room and within the community to be able to get that across the line. And look, definitely we're eyes open that it's only the first 2 or 3 months. We want to see success be sustained and be long term. But right now we're seeing really positive views and want to see that continue to be successful, to be able to provide that view for what public transport could look like in Whanganui in the future. And I mean, that's really what it is. It's talked about a little bit as a trial. I guess I'd really think about it as a real use case for sort of saying, if this works and if this is what the community wants, is this something that we can be doing across the city to be able to provide that benefit to all areas, not just be it those in Castlecliff or Aramaho where the service may run at the moment. Next slide. So this talks to some of that. As I said, the Tide launch has been great. Streets for People, which Kathryn spoke about, again, one of the key projects there is on St Hill Street, around sort of the main bus terminal area, and we're really looking forward to seeing that enhanced as a really user-friendly space for people waiting for the bus. One thing we did do when we launched the Tide was put in a real-time information board there. If you had a chance to see that provides up-to-date information, and that's what we're going to see more of through this Transport Choices project coming up, along with more shelters and other accessibility improvements. And that just starts moving us towards a point of people showing up at the bus stop going, has my bus gone or not? Am I waiting for it? Is it still coming? How far away is it? I'm standing in the rain. I don't know if it's 2 minutes away or 20 minutes away, and can really help answer questions like that. And again, that's some of the really good feedback we got from the Whanganui public, was that we weren't providing that sort of information, and that was really being sought, and that was a real barrier for people to be able to catch public transport. Next slide. And then just looking more closely at the Transport Choices project, and I guess one of the reasons that we've come to this committee today is that we're really aware that there are many views across the community, across the city, around PT, around wanting to have a stop or shelter or something like that, and it may be that we're back engaging with this committee in the future when there are decisions to be made around this project over the next 12, 15 months, around bus shelters, around things like that. So I guess we're just wanting to be here today to highlight sort of where this is going. So as Kathryn said, we were successful, Horizon was successful alongside Whanganui District Council for about 1.2 million in funding for this project. A lot of this is not just bus shelters and not just screens, but also other accessibility improvements, secure bike parking or something like that, to be able to create the opportunity for people to cycle to the bus stop and then be able to get on the bus, and wrapping all that improvement around that. I mean, for context, between Whanganui District Council and Horizons, we probably invest maybe less than $100,000 a year in infrastructure, in public transport infrastructure in Whanganui. It would take us years to be able to make the sort of change we would be able to make through this investment, with the support of government and Waka to be able to move this forward. So we've really looked at a number of potential locations around the city. And you probably go next slide. I think it's the last one. And these are sort of ideas or potential locations at this stage to be able to think about how can we best spread this investment across the city, provide opportunities in many of the suburbs that our public transport network connects, and make them accessible for the most people, and I guess get the best value for money out of that. So that's getting into sort of a quite detailed area, but I definitely think it's important that we be able to signal early to yourselves and to the public where we see this working and where we see the benefits of that line. And I guess really looking forward to being able to work with the team here at Whanganui District Council to be able to deliver this over the next, as I said, 12, 15 months. We've got until June next year to be able to spend this money which is available to us. So yeah, that alongside the tide and treats people is really a really exciting time. And as we look forward, as I said, we're really eyes open for how the tide is working, what that could look like in the future, what that future investment could look like as we move forward in Whanganui as well, and being able to continue to provide a really useful and tangible public transport option to the city, because in places right now we definitely know that it's not as a really difficult service to access and not accessible, not frequent, doesn't meet people's needs. So we're really trying to work in that direction and find that balance between what our community wants and is willing to pay for, along with, you know, putting our hand on our heart saying, look, we want to deliver the best service we can. So open to any questions on anything PT related in general in Whanganui, or anything else.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a great presentation. But before we actually move into questions, I just want to acknowledge two people in the back row there. Anthony Tonin, our transport guru, and made a huge difference to what is happening in Whanganui with you, and a welcome return of past councillor Alan Taylor. Welcome back as a Horizons councillor. Lovely to see you. And questions. The first question is with Councillor Michael.
Kia ora. Thank you for your presentation. One bit of information that will derive my next questions was $3.8 million was the total cost of public transport for buses, correct? Do you have the Whanganui figures?
So you're right, that is across the region, that money. I don't have it for the rates amount off the top of my head.
Do you have a rough amount?
In terms of our bus service, it's about so the gross cost, so not the rates cost, but the gross cost is about 2.1 million. So if you take away fare revenue and Wakatai revenue, it would be somewhere around 400,000, 500,000.
Okay, yeah, I anticipated 660, so that's quite close. So we do about 66,000 trips a year, so about $10 a trip, roughly.
If that's the maths, then...
Yeah, that's fine, because it works out, we're doing much better on the tide, so 360,000 for the tide. What's your estimation on the tide yearly? Because I have seen it is impacting the other buses, but not much, you're correct. It looks like a delta of about 36,000 to 40,000 trips extra a year. Is that what you're anticipating?
We had, somewhere around 5,000 or 6,000? 5,500 in March. Trips, and March is often one of the best months for public transport across the country. So, yeah, I guess 50 or 60,000 based on that could be in that ballpark.
But it impacts the other buses. So April.
I guess that's to be seen. To date, it's
true. I'm only taking April's figures. We're down by 2,500 in the other buses. But so about $10 a trip is what it costs us. And the last question is the B card. So how do because I will fully admit I've never taken a bus in my life. How do I pay for a bus? Like, can I just go on and go beep and I'm done?
So you can get a B card on the bus, and you can top it up on the bus.
$5 to buy it?
$5 to buy it, and then top it up for any amount. At the moment, it's still half price fare, so that will be coming to an end very soon.
Yeah.
but then yeah, you can top up on the bus and then just tag on, tag off with your B card.
Can I pay with my Apple Pay or Google Pay?
So you can't at the moment.
Right.
So there's another project, which is a national ticketing system project, which that sort of payment method will most likely be accommodated. But that's still to come in our region, probably in a few years' time.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. My question comes from a local resident, so I'm representing that question. I also don't know if I'm asking the right person, so forgive me if it's not in your area. A number of public facilities are designated as an essential service, therefore they run at a loss. Buses are one of them. They are a designated essential services. They will always run at a loss, supposedly. The question I've been asked today, if we are going to improve patronage on our bus services, what incentives, what things can come up to improve that? And the question was, if an essential service such as buses runs at a loss, why not make public bus services free to the public? I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to some of the discussion and debate that was had around our Passenger Transport Committee table last year for our regional public transport plan, and where we ended up was that fares and being able to generate revenue for our public transport service should be equitable for, I guess, all people, so not just users but also ratepayers. And so that started to talk to there being a fair contribution from those who are catching the bus, along with noting that there is actually a reasonable contribution that comes from ratepayers alongside that as well, and from government through the National Land Transport Fund. So yes, that is a fair question, and one that gets asked. Equally, I think that there are a number of portions of groups of the community who we probably can be asking to pay for their trips on the bus. It may not be that while traditionally we've provided a service that was suitable for superannuants or those who didn't have another means. I think a service like the Tide changes that, and we're actually targeting a slightly different demographic, those who might want to travel not because they don't have a vehicle to use, but because they want to be able to use public transport or for other reasons. So yeah, I probably don't have a good answer to your question, but I think it's probably just finding that balance, really.
Might just add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Ross. So I think some of that is just political, because it's about funding and some of those decisions at the various tables of parties that are involved. But I guess I would also add that in terms of some of the aspirational thinking around public transport and the level of service is giving households the option of only one less vehicle. But to achieve that, you need a reliable service, and so there's some real direct financial benefits that can be achieved at the household level if we get that service to the level that we're aspiring collectively.
Thank you. I think you've got off pretty light with the question, so I think your content must have been pretty jolly good. So do I have a mover for this? Michael, seconded. Pete, Councillor Pete. And do we have any comments? Councillor Kate.
Just a thanks, really. I have had the impression in the past that and I appreciate the information about the money that's spent in Whanganui is charged to Whanganui, the money that is spent in Palmerston North is charged to Palmerston North via the rating system. But I have had the impression in the past that Whanganui's public transport has languished for lack of love. That is certainly not the case of recent times, and I would just like to thank you for that. I mean, the level of engagement for a number of reasons, including, the very active engagement that's come from this side of the Rangatike, is appreciated. So, yeah, thank you, and we'll be watching and looking forward to further love given to public transport in Whanganui. Thank you.
Councillor Michael.
Me again. I love public transport. I really do. It's why I'm talking so much. But obviously some figures that don't make sense to me. And thank you for clarifying. I'm with my esteemed colleague over the boat to me. It's good to get clarity, because I haven't had clarity in the last 6-7 months, and people ask me questions and I don't actually know the answers. I keep going, go ask Alan, he knows. But to one of my esteemed colleagues to my left, I actually think that makes total sense. So if 16% of Horizon spend is roughly Whanganui, and 0.8 million is derived from the amount spent on ticket fares, which means there's only 7% of the total cost of our public services is actually made by person paying the tickets. And you already saw from me, I'm not going to take a bus because I'm not going to go buy a B card. I'm not going to go muck around with that. Would I jump on a bus if it was right in front of me? Yes, I would, if it was free. So for 128k, we can have free buses. That's what I'm hearing. So I think we should discuss that. And we just spent 160k on the tide. It's something worth thinking about whether or not we want free buses in Whanganui to increase that patronage across the board and increase our collective system. So thank you.
Thank you. Me, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to support what Councillor Kate said and to say thank you for the effort that you guys have gone and the energy that's gone into this. I've been in this role for 6 months, and it's been a lot of enthusiasm and smart thinking. So I just want to say thank you. My challenge for us all really is I'd like to think of Whanganui as on our leading edge, kind of the way that we think and do things is to be innovative, trailblazers, front-footed, proactive. So let's keep this trial going with the tide, but let's also look ahead for other innovative ways of moving our people around our city, whatever that looks like, safely and easily. Thank you.
Yes, a big thank you. I think we're at quite an exciting turning point, and I think Whanganui is sort of in the lead in a lot of cases. So collectively, I think it's going really well. So thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. You got who the mover and seconder were, eh?
No.
Michael and Pete.
Michael, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our guests and to Kathryn online and the other person online, and safe travels home. Good to see you all.
Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you. And our next item is the housing strategy update.
Madam Chair, my plan is to sit with
Yeah. That's good. So Councillor Kate is the housing champion, and she's going to potentially participate in this, or not, is the case maybe? Yeah. There'll be no silly questions today. Over to you.
Oh, sorry, kia ora. Today is just a little bit of an update on where we are with the housing strategy, and I just want to point out a couple of the priorities that we've been working on. One is the long-term option, so we are meeting today with a contractor to start the feasibility study, so really excited about the opportunity to get that started and start moving through that process. The funding for that was out of the Better Off funding, so we have the funding for the feasibility only at this stage, but it gives us an opportunity to be able to then use that report to be able to look for what the next stages are from there. So really excited about that opportunity. And the second point I wanted to highlight is the future proofing of our pensioner housing portfolio. So we contracted with Turley & Co last year to review the current older persons portfolio and provide us with some advice regarding the future demand. We've got a really comprehensive report, and that will be coming to the strategy and policy meeting in June. Yes, in June, and for the committee to just accept the report and as I said, it's very comprehensive, and so there'll be an opportunity to think about that going forward into the definitely into the LTP.
I do have one question, and that is around the fact that the report was received in December and it's going to come to the committee in June. Is that a resourcing issue, or what's the cause of the delay in getting it?
So it arrived like the 23rd of December, so it was just a matter of reviewing all that we had with that and then being able to pull that into a report.
Thank you.
And would you like to comment on how long we've had the additional resource of the housing officers? Jeanette and Amanda?
Yes, so we've got 2 additional resource, and I think that was February and March, so...
Yeah. Just quite recent. Thank you. We do. Councillor Rob, question.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Have you reviewed the number of sites available at 83 Taupo Key? And there is discussion about negotiating with neighbouring properties. Can you update us on that, please?
So the negotiation with the neighbouring property didn't work so well for us. It's Lynn's land and they're not able to subcontract. So under their contract with Lynn's, they cannot subcontract. But we're working with Tūpoho to see if we can come up with a different option for that. So that's still negotiating.
So how many sites now are going to fit onto that site at 83 Taupo Key? We were told there's going to be 12. There's not going to be 12.
You'd still fit. I think you'll still fit 12.
Well, how will you organise that? Because at the moment, about 5 get there.
Yeah, so it'll be organised. The plan is that they'll all be organised in a. There'll be like spacing. It'll all be spaced out for them, so they won't be able to park sideways or anything. Like currently, there's no plan. People can park however they want.
Yeah.
So that plan will change.
So the advice we're getting from the officer here is that it will fit 12.
Oh yeah. Someone will have to be there to direct them on.
Question. No more questions? Thank you. Could I have a... Oh, we do. Sorry, Philippa.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, thank you for the report and the work done. Really appreciate it. This is an important important and big issue for our council and our community. So I just, so I'm going to find some questions. No, hey, but just look. Yeah, it's a good, concise report. I mean, I just want to Anzac Parade in particular. I guess my question is, this kind of mixed model we've got with still that that we're going to support some homeless people if they wish to stay there, while it's kind of largely a freedom camping site. Do you think that really is viable? Do you understand many people, a lot of people exercising, multi-sport club and residents, particularly Whanganui East, are unhappy about that? And do we see that we can really kind of, have you got any indication already that homeless people, are happy to be moved and understand that issue to our homeless site, which we're supporting? Lots of questions in that, but it's really that whole crux of this matter that I think is a big issue for our community when they're going to be paying to support a homeless site, and while they've still got this issue of the encumbrance of particularly Anzac Parade.
David would like to answer that question.
Through you, Madam Chair, look, I think these questions have been asked and answered in the past, both in meetings and in workshop settings. We are embarking on a difficult challenge, and as I've said in the past, we are playing in the gaps that are being left by other government agencies. And what we're doing at both Anzac Parade, Taupo Key, is not going to solve the problem. This is being done in the spirit of progress rather than delayed perfection. So the answer, I think, to your question is it going to fix the problems? Absolutely no. No way. But will it make things a little bit better than the status quo that we had previously? Hopefully, yes. But this is less than ideal, and we are doing the best we can with the limited resources we've got to solve a systemic and complicated challenge that is beyond simply just bricks and mortar providing more houses or shelters for people.
Thanks, David. Just to go a little bit further there, though, I mean, like, for example, you know, do New Zealand Police, do our police, are they supporting this kind of model when, you know, not going into details, but we know there's been some quite significant issues that occurred around Anzac Parade, and we risk something like that happening again and possibly ending up in a, you know, in a really negative situation for this community.
So, through you, Madam Chair, short answer is yes, the police are supporting and I think doing everything they can in the circumstances alongside us. And look, I understand the concerns that you're raising, and they're shared by myself and staff. Some of the improvements that we've put in place, though, beyond just setting up Taupoki, include the more rigorous enforcement regime, some additional security patrols, to make sure that we are managing the antisocial and hostile behaviour that we're seeing from some of the individuals at those sites. Those additional interventions seem to have had the desired effect. The feedback that we're getting is that the behaviour issues have subsided considerably. We're not getting anywhere near as many complaints as we were previously. But again, is it perfect? Has it solved the problem in its entirety? No. But has it helped? Yes. Are we getting the support from the police? Yes, also.
Thank you. And so I have got a third question. And it's an important area, Chair, so I'd really appreciate just so I guess in regard to just understanding what other support and what other financial support, what does that look like? So I'm reading, I just don't quite understand it, but for example, Tupaho are going to be key with a homeless site, and then you talk about another provider as well. Maybe is all this? Sorry, I guess the brief question is, I hear MSD, I hear New Zealand Police, I hear Housing First, whatever that is. I imagine that's Kāinga Ora, all interested more, all stepping up. But are they contributing financially to help solve the solution that is not actually, that many could say is not a council issue?
So far, the answer to that is no. But we continue to lobby and push. Myself and the Mayor met with our MP just a couple of days ago, and we're raising specifically the homeless situation and the need for support from government agencies, both in terms of operational support, them stepping in so that we can step back, but also financial support so that this doesn't have to be funded from our ratepayers. I certainly would be of the view that our community is paying twice, once through their general taxation for government agencies that are not doing their jobs entirely, and then again through their rates for us to close the gaps.
Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thank you. David, I'd just like to ask you the questions because quite a few months ago we said that, or you said that you were developing rules for freedom camping. We haven't seen those rules yet. So I'd like you to tell me in the committee, have the rules been developed? How are they being applied? And first one is, how are you establishing that these people are actually homeless? For instance, why is the person that's in a fairly luxurious caravan for the last 12 months still parked on Springvale Park? And why is that person considered homeless?
Through you, Madam Chair. So, first of all, to clarify, we were not developing a set of rules for freedom campers because that is governed by our bylaw. and the freedom camping laws, the set of rules that you refer to were relating to the use of the temporary homeless facility by people considered homeless, so not freedom campers. As I've said in the workshop setting, we are trying to strike a balance between providing some order and also being compassionate to people that are in a vulnerable state because they're experiencing homelessness. So these rules are a set of guidelines rather than hard and fast rules, and they are being deliberately kept flexible. This is an operational matter of how we manage the facility when it's running, and we need the ability to adapt and deal with the challenges of the situation as they present themselves. So hopefully that gives you some idea of how they're being applied. In terms of the specifics of individual campers, I'm not going to comment on those because I'm not well enough informed to do so right now, but as we've previously said several weeks ago now, we changed our approach and started to enforce the freedom camping bylaw and move people on. If there are people that should have been moved on that we haven't, we can have a separate conversation about that, and I can get our enforcement staff to investigate.
The freedom camping bylaw says that they can't put furniture around their site, and that doesn't appear to be being enforced. If we're going to enforce the freedom camping bylaw, why don't we enforce it in total as it is?
As I've said, the intention is to enforce it. If there are areas where we're not, I'll have a conversation with you offline and I'll make sure our enforcement staff conduct themselves accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Josh.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up on Philippa's question around Tūpoho social services. I just want to understand the certainty that we've got that service will be in place for the 2 years or whatever it is. Do we have some sort of agreement with them or a contract of any sort?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So we don't right at this moment, but we have an agreement that we are working through, and they've put quite a little work into the support that they're providing. They've done all the documentation for us, and so they just want to get things started, and it'll be a little bit flexible to begin with. I don't know how much time this will take on a daily basis, so they're open to being a little bit flexible along with us to make sure that we get the right mix of how that needs to work.
Sure, that's good to hear. Thanks.
Councillor Ross.
Yes, Madam Chair, this may well be one for the CE. I read an article this morning out of Palmerston North to do with rate increases, and the gentleman was quoted as saying that his had gone up dramatically, 51%, and he said one way around it would be to subdivide his property, because in Whanganui we have a lot of properties, and I understand in item 8, the residential spatial plan, it talks about work is underway to understand the total amount of development available in infill areas. So my query is not a commitment, it's more of a request that I believe increasingly over the years to come that those who can subdivide may choose to go down that path. In having your property assessed and the fees payable to have your property assessed to divide it, this gentleman in particular in Palmerston North quoted $5,800 to subdivide his particular property.
Question, Ross.
The question was, he said he can't afford to provide that money. So if an option is to subdivide your property, would there be in this policy a review of the fees associated with subdividing your property for infill?
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Fallon may recall a workshop we had where, as elected members, you have tasked me and my team to go away and do a little bit of work around how we can better incentivise subdivision and infill development, with a view to exactly what you've just alluded to, removing some of those, say, financial barriers to people getting started on the process. That work is not yet complete, but it should be soon.
Fantastic. Can I have a mover for that item, please?
Thank you. Glenda, seconder. Philippa, thank you very much. Any comments? Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, it's really great to get this report. I'm not sure, apologies, might say what the time frame is it, but it's such a big area. You know, I hopefully we quite frequent because it's such a huge, important area to this council. But it's a really good, succinct report. I know there's a whole lot of work happening under it. And you know, it is right from homeless right through to you know, development and growth for this community. So it's you know, it's a big area, but it's something also we've invested in our 10-year plan. And I think the, you know, community expect us to keep moving forward strongly, particularly in this term of council. Just noting, you know, really thank you for the updates from our team and from David. These are hard questions, but they're important questions for people for us to understand more, for people to hear. You know, a silent council's not, you know, we want to be a council that is happy to have these robust discussions in the room, and hopefully it gets out there in the media or through our own comms team. But I do, yeah, I mean, the space around this kind of balance between homelessness and freedom camping, I think, is probably the one, you know, one of the you know, the big issues that you know, the general community just wants to see, you know, wants this council to get this as right as they can, and that pressure, as David said, it's like our people are double paying. They're paying through their rates and they're paying through their taxes, and we really do need, you know, in this government with the budget today, and a wellbeing budget needs to be investing in, and if it's not getting the action through its ministries, it might, you know, or enough action because they're too far away from the people. You know, it'd be great to see it investing closer to home into some of its, you know, its councils, etc. So and with it, particularly with us working so closely with iwi in this space. Thank you.
Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. I really just want to say a big thank you. Lauren, this was a really fantastic report, and I really appreciate all of the work that you do in this space. It's obviously a really fast moving and developing situation, and thank you very much, and to the Chief Executive for all of the forward-thinking work that's gone into this strategy. And I tautoko what my colleague says about continual seeking of funding from central government to pick up the slack that is clearly needed. Thank you.
Well said. Councillor Rob.
Thank you. Look, I asked the question really, what is homelessness, you know? It's to my mind, it's not what we're seeing down at Anzac Parade. It's not what we're seeing at Springvale Park. Now, at Springvale Park, this luxury caravan that I raised before turned up again yesterday and apparently parked there with, they've even put cones around it. You know, now, the situation down at Anzac Parade, you've got a character down there who has these kayaks there. I mean, that's not homelessness. What we're doing at Taupo Key is not solving the situation at all. I'm now totally convinced that we're making the wrong decision by developing that down there at 83 Taupo Key, because there are better places available and there are better policies that we can adopt as a council to address homelessness than creating a potential slum village. That's what we're heading for. You know, and we have got this wrong as a council, and we have to start talking now about some sensible solutions to this. I know we've talked and talked and talked, but there are better options. Thank you.
Jenny.
Yeah, which one of us wants to go first? Councillor Kate.
You have the last word.
Yeah, probably say what I'm going to say. Councillor Kate.
Go on. I'm really proud of the strategy, the approach that we're taking to this. That said, you know, it's been, I would have liked it for us to have been doing this last year, to have been at this stage last year. This homelessness there's a lot of evidence that homelessness is a real issue. It is not dreamed up. There are a lot of people that are homeless. It's very clear, and if council can help, albeit in a small way, then it should. I'm not sure that I've already said, but I will say it again if I haven't. This is an extremely complex issue. It has been in the making for probably 50 years. It has happened because successive governments have ignored affordable housing and allowed unaffordable housing to most people to flourish. You know, it is a complex issue. It will take complex solutions, and this particular issue of creating a small hub for homelessness where those who are homeless can be supported to help find a future is absolutely what we should be doing. I'm really proud of it.
Thank you, Councillor Michael.
Thank you. Definition of homelessness is a good thing to start with. Living situations where people with no other option to acquire safe and secure housing are without shelter, in temporary accommodation, sharing accommodation with a household, or living in uninhabitable housing. We've just scratched the surface. We have 50 to 70 people living in dunes, tents, caravans, and I will fully admit that a few of them, very few of them, have completely hit some of our trust. They have been aggravated, they have been causing crime, but we've got to sit back and think of the vision that Mayor, I can say you can't, yeah, Mayor Andrew said, yeah, Mayor Andrew said on our first week, this is step one, and I think we're already starting to like think this is the end result. No, this is the first step, and I'm not happy. I'm not happy we're going into winter and they're going to be sitting in Taupoki. I will be absolutely livid if I see a child sleeping in a car this winter. I've been promised by the ministry that it will not happen, but I'm going to be looking. I expect you all to be looking as well. Not one child should be sleeping in a car this winter. It is darn cold. That's step one. Step two is to look at and a good example of this is certain members of society who cannot move from an abusive relationship because they have nowhere to go. Women's refuge is completely full. There is no men refuge because men should man up, shouldn't they? And yet they have a massive mental health crisis that they cannot even fathom to understand. Our central government, and it does not matter to me which colour you support, has done nothing in the entirety of the time I've been in here in New Zealand. They ignore mental health, they ignore the housing crisis, and I urge us all to stand up objectively for the better value and economical and social development of our district first. First step, the 50 people, hopefully don't cram them into 12 slots. Hopefully there are only 12, and if there are more, then we will know that there are more. Then we're moving on to stage 2, as we all know. Then there'll be stage 3, 4. So I want us to remember the fact that on our first session with Mayor Andrew, we did have a plan from start, the most needy, up until myself and yourself around affordable housing for our kids and the future of Whanganui. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, so look, this is more of a general statement. I've said before that we can only be measured by how we treat our most vulnerable in society, and what I've learned in this role so far is that we have to strike the balance between being efficient with our resourcing and being commercially savvy, but also at the end of the day we're here for our community, and so from a social perspective, one of the basic needs of our society is to have roofs over everyone's head and a warm home. And the reality is that we do have people sleeping in the dunes still. We have people sleeping under the bridge, under bridges, and but the most visual part is in our freedom camping areas where we see people, and some of them may be abusing the system. Maybe, I get that, and you know, to Rob's point. In saying that, this is really, really complex, to Kate's point, and it's a theory of second best. What we're doing is actually trialling something, and I think we're doing a really good job of actually front-footing this. You know, talking to other mayors around New Zealand, no one's nailed this. We're trying something, and I think we're doing the best we can, and I want to say thank you for those that are putting in that effort to find solutions. It's not perfect. I don't think it ever was going to be. But what we are doing is we're being innovative and trialling something new. And to David's point before, we met with Steph Lewis last week, our local MP, and I want this to be on record, we have pushed really hard for government funding to support us to deliver a interim arrangement, not a solution, an interim arrangement for our people who are homeless, and it's been very difficult. So we again met with her last week, and we've again continued to push for that. But from a council perspective and council officer perspective, we you know, I want to applaud what we are doing here in this space. Yes, it's not perfect, but it's not an easy fix. It looks like it is, but it's not. And at the end of the day, these are human beings that have got beating hearts, and I'm getting all kind of emotional about this, but it's very real when you talk to these people. So it's a bit of a ramble there, but I just wanted to say what was on my mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Yes, as has been said by a number of people, it's a very complex situation, and it's one that's been landed upon us, unfortunately, by those failures of successive governments over a very, very long period of time. This is not something that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years. It's been building up for an incredibly long period of time, with failures in the mental health system and failures in the housing system, not to mention the health and everywhere else. So we're doing what we can. We're accepting responsibility for our community. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Yes, it's going to cost us a little bit, but it's not a huge sum. It's a sum I don't want to spend, and it's time I don't want our team spending time on. But we really don't have a choice because it's our community. So I fully support the steps that are being taken. Yes, it is an experiment. I hope it works. We're going to find out. And so, onwards and upwards. Thank you. I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Our next item is Youth Places and Spaces, and I invite Lauren Tamihana back to the presenter's seat.
Well, thank you again. The Youth Places and Spaces report presented today is a follow-on from the paper that was presented in February, and we were asked to bring back some more information as to why the movable pop-up was not a viable option. This paper clearly outlines that the movable pop-up is not a viable option. We followed up with a number of different places that have pop-ups, and it was confirmed that the costs in the report were unrealistic and unsustainable. In saying that, the feasibility study does provide us with a lot of really good insights, and so we're using that information to be able to move forward and look at other options. We currently have a vacancy for the project support officer's role, so we're just going to take a little bit of a step back and look at some of our options. We're going to keep continuing. I've had some conversations with some organisations in town that have potential to think about the places and spaces in their space. And I think that that's definitely some of the options we need to be looking at, not looking for our own place, but where we can add value. And I guess ultimately we just need to make some, sit back and we need to wait for the budget decisions in the with the next annual plan, so that we can be really sure about what we have going forward from there as well. So this isn't stopping. It just, this report just provides the information that yes, the decision was right to not go ahead with the movable space, but we are continuing to look at options going forward.
Because there are no other red lights, and I'll ask a question, Lauren. There is a vacancy in the lead role for the support for the youth committee. Are we looking at a review of that, or are we looking at recruitment?
I met with Councillor Charlotte and Councillor Josh the other day just to talk about what that might look like. Yes, we definitely want to move into recruitment, but actually is there some opportunity to think about that slightly differently going forward? And so we've had a conversation around some of that as well, to think about that for the recruitment aspect of that.
So, because this one is one of those ones where it can easily slip off the radar for a while and 6 months go by, I'd like, even if it's just a one-pager, an update at each meeting. So I don't want to put onerous task on you, but I would like that update each month, even if it is just a minor couple of paragraphs to say what the progress is, just so that it stays on our radar and it's on officers' radar as well. That is something that's important, and that I know that there's complications and etc. around achieving what we want. So thank you very much. Can I have a mover, please?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, question. Philippa, you have this knack of pushing the button 2 seconds after we've moved on, and it's really great if you did it just a little sooner, so thank you.
I just want a little bit surprised once again. It's another key area. It's a key budget we put in our last 10-year plan, and you know, I think discussion and some questions are important. So I thank you again, Lauren. I guess I was going to ask a question about the Youth Council. I mean, I did read this last night, and I read they've been, well, so I'm just double checking how involved they are in this whole conversation, please.
So they were really involved in this conversation. They participated in the feasibility study. They participated in the workshop that was held as part of the feasibility. They reviewed the document, and they've had quite a bit to say about that since the report came out. So yeah, they definitely are involved in this.
Thank you. I read that there was, I can't remember the name, I think in Christchurch, is it Lives? There's I read about, obviously we're looking at some other best practice. I guess my question is how far are we looking? I mean, that's a question. There must be, and I actually saw online, I saw something going back a month or so, which indicated, I guess, rather than that whole thing, and that's probably where you're leading to, putting money into buildings, putting money more into project work, seems to be probably where the most successful youth projects are going. But how wide are we, how available is information around the country at other models? Because it just seems like we're struggling to get somewhere. If you could perhaps answer that. I just have one more question.
Yep. So that was the point of the feasibility, was to look at what else was happening, and we have got some information in there. But the community wellbeing team then went out after the last meeting and looked at some other models, and that's how we got to some of the conclusions in this report today. Certainly we've looked at other options, because I guess ultimately if we put something in place like the pop-up, or we invested in a building, we've still got to think about then what goes into that building, who runs that building, whose responsibility is it, how is that managed, and all of that comes alongside of that as well. So definitely we have been looking at other options and thinking about how this might work in someone else's space. Then what is our contribution to someone else's space? Is that an option for us? Is that a better option? Because we could, as I said, build something or invest in something, but then we've still got to make it work, and that making it work doesn't necessarily sit with us. And across the country, that's sitting in a lot of different spaces and ways with a whole lot of different organisations involved. So yep, we're definitely looking into all of that.
Okay, and I guess my last question was kind of around, you know, how you said you're kind of waiting for us to make decisions around the annual plan, I guess, keeping this budget. You know, my question is isn't it quite difficult for council to kind of keep confirming funding when we are 2 years down the track from at this annual plan of making those 10-year plan decisions, and we're kind of, you know, it's hard to see what the solution is. So as a council, you know, sitting there with an 8.2 average rate increase and looking at, you know, holding a budget line or continuing to spend in the space when we are struggling to get, I'm finding that quite difficult. And I guess, yeah, you know, do you understand that?
Yeah, look, I do understand that, and I guess, and that's why I made that comment, because right now, if we were to make a decision right now, that's got an impact on the next few years, and so we have to think about what decision we make that then moves forward, and if our money's not there going forward, how do we make that decision right now?
You know, I guess,
We're asking questions, Philip, and not comments. So, do you want to add anything to that? I mean, that's a budget process question.
Yeah, and I suppose the general comment I would make here is, on one hand, I appreciate the frustration that as elected members you want to see us make progress against some of these issues. The Youth Spaces project is one that is not going anywhere near as fast as we all would like. On the other hand, I hope you can appreciate and take some assurance in the fact that there is a huge amount of due diligence being going on behind the scenes to make sure that if we spend our ratepayers' money, it is on the right project that is going to have a positive impact on our youth, rather than just doing anything to get the money spent. And I think that is the proper and correct way of doing things, notwithstanding acknowledging the frustration you have.
So, who would like? Oh, okay. Who would like to second? Charlotte, thank you very much. Who would like to comment? Any comments? Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, and thanks, Lauren, for this report. It's good to see some comprehensive feedback on the feasibility study, and obviously a reflection of a number of the comments made in that meeting. Look, in response to some of the questions asked earlier, I just wanted to put it on record that there's a whole range of models around what a youth hub or a youth space or youth centre could look like around the country. I mean, New Plymouth has an amazing space run by a church. Stratford has a small community hall where they fund a part-timer to deliver after-school programs. Palmerston North has a youth space that is entirely funded by council through their library budget. I'm aware of another space in Auckland that is funded by a charitable trust with local board budget support. So there's a whole lot of models and some really successful ones from what I've seen too. And I echo to an extent the frustrations of my colleague, because we are 2 years down the track now. And I understand entirely the constraints that this council has around project management and project delivery, and totally sympathise with that. Really looking forward to seeing a new project support officer, whatever that might look like, in the youth committee role, and hopefully seeing a role that has the space to be able to really get stuck into this project as we head towards the next long-term plan. What I would say is, referring back to the last item around housing, we saw there that a governance group has been set up to coordinate aspects of that project, and I've always felt that what the Youth Places and Spaces project really needs right now is some kind of informal oversight group to begin work on what the model looks like, because we don't actually need to wait for a council officer to be employed and dedicated to this role to have that conversation. We have a feasibility study. We know that there are a whole range of different models that are successful and some less successful around this country, and we know that we have enthusiastic members of the youth sector in our community right now that want to have this conversation and want to discuss what the model could look like. So my really urgent request on this council is, and I'm happy to contribute to this as well, is that we look at setting up some kind of low-key governance body to look at getting to a point where we can agree on the model. Because right now, you know, we've gone through a feasibility study and we haven't got to a conclusion. So we really need a roadmap. Once we have that, then it'll be much easier to implement the project once we have the appropriate resourcing. So thank you, and that's my urgent request.
Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you. There's not too much more I can add to that, to be honest. Ho tōku Josh. Except in regards to funding coming through again, it's a little bit chicken or the egg, and I would hate to see this project fall behind. I think it's, since I've become the youth council, district councillor, it has thrown me into the rangatahi space, and I have had conversations with many, many people working within the rangatahi sector, and there is a lot of disconnect within the sector, and I think that a centralised youth hub is a space where council can play a role to facilitate more conversation, more connection, and make a real difference in that space. This project is important, and we need to continue the funding on this.
Councillor Kate. Thank you. Good discussion. For those of us who have been around a little while in the community sector, I think you'll agree with me when I suggest to you that community development is a slow boil. You know, we can't dream it up overnight. It needs to be thoroughly thought through and developed. At the same time, I hear this frustration that we haven't landed anywhere. And I hear suggestions about how we might pick up the pace. So I also heard the chair talking about keeping this front and centre and coming up to regular meetings, which I wholeheartedly endorse. I'd suggest that the proper, and I'll describe it as support for the officers to write the roadmap, should be at the Youth Council or Youth Committee, whichever one we call it, Youth Council. Thank you. I would be happy to lend my shoulder to help, progress that particular roadmap, if that's what we're calling it, and that might help us. If others are interested, might help us in a low-key way progress this. At the same time, having it before this committee on a regular basis might help as well. But I really appreciate the information that's been gathered so far.
Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I asked what might be slightly provocative questions because to get the answers that we've got, and I think the community needs to hear that, because you know, I do hear frustration, I mean, within ourselves, that we're 2 years down the track, and within the community, youth rangatahi and some of their whānau. You know, and we know, and you know, we've been recently challenged by Sport Whanganui about, you know, our commitment in the whole wellbeing space, you know, of active lifestyles, etc. So it's important we, you know, we robustly discuss this stuff. Yeah, great to hear Councillor Josh and Charlotte, who are, you know, just hearing just firsthand about how passionate you are and the work you're doing in the space and examples and stuff that you used, Councillor Josh. So, and fantastic. I know we're not to name people, but what the heck. And the CE, you know, I absolutely endorse that. We just I don't want to throw money into the wrong bucket just to kind of say we've done something. So, yeah, you know, I think there's, you know, there's been a plea around a low-level governance group or a roadmap, and I look forward to and would be, you know, interested in if required, or could add anything to adding to that as well. So, really good discussion. Obviously, you know, high on our agenda. It's another key area that it's, yeah, we just need to keep up there. So, thank you for that discussion, and I hope the community gets to see and hear some of our thoughts around this.
Councillor Rob.
Thank you. Yes, we've had this on the agenda for quite a few years now, quite a few terms, in fact, and it is disappointing to see that it really has not really got to any stage of creating this centre. And I am disappointed to hear conversation about, you know, the need to appoint a council officer and various things to make it proceed. You know, what will make this proceed is if the right community group gets formed. You know, and I go back, the Youth Services Trust that operated, Marlene Wetton ran it, operated for many years in Whanganui, operated a centre, a very successful centre down in Taupo Key, offered lots of different services to youth. It was not only a hangout spot, but it offered medical help, all sorts of things. It was a great model. And I think that we have to move this conversation out to the community and try and be a catalyst for getting a trust such as this formed again. Yeah, and that's the conversation that.
Point of order.
Point of order. Just to keep the record straight, Youth Services
What is your
Trust.
point of order?
My point of order is that the councillor is presenting information that is not quite correct. Youth Services Trust still exists and offers many.
I don't doubt that it.
Okay.
Well, it's great to hear it still exists. That's not a point of order, Madam Chair.
My decision, Councillor Fergusson.
We all know the rules. The point is that there is an organisation, the type of organisation, the model of organisation that needs to run this sort of facility, and because it won't be run by council. Thank you.
Thank you. As a past chair of Youth Services Trust, I can say that it still does exist, and there were elements of the historical venue down on Taupo Key that were successful, but there are elements of it that were very, very unsuccessful as well. And it provides us a good guideline for what we need to be careful about when we establish this new, call it a venue for want of a better term. So, you know, to me, it's that sort of nexus between speed and precision. I want things to go a lot faster. We've been talking about this for many years, not just 2 years, it's years and years. We need a place for our young people, but then we need to have the right place as well. And I don't think that council's the right place necessarily to make that decision. It's a community decision. So I think, you know, we need a greater involvement of our those members of our community who deal in the youth space to participate with us to help guide through what is the best solution, because it's very easy to default to, we need a building, We need staff, you know, and then we can do a lot of clip-ons. I know that when we do finally settle on something, Youth Services Trust, I think we still have the chair in the room, would maybe be an option for you know, co-sharing, but those are undecided. So I would, as I've said earlier on, I'd like to see this come before us on a regular basis, even in brevity. But I'd like to see progress, and I'd like to see that progress, if possible, to come from the keen councillors, the keen officers, and those members of our community, so that we can use the good stuff that came out of that review, because there was a lot of good in it. It just landed in the wrong spot. We just need to move the spot and get something done. So thank you very much to everyone involved, and the conversation's been great. I'm going to put the motion that the Operations and Performance Committee receive the report Youth Places and Spaces Update May 2023. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Finally, we have next item is 5.4, the third quarter financial and non-financial results for the 9 months to 31 March 2023. And Louise, also welcome to the table.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Vian Lapshane. Myself and Louise are presenting the 9-month results for the financial and non-financial performance today. So to give you a bit of an overview of how we're going to run this, I'll run through just the summary of our results, then go into the operating results, have a little look at the capital results, talk about debt, and then Louise will just talk about the non-financial results, and then we'll open up for any questions. So
please, we assume that the bulk of it has been read, and just go for your highlights.
Yes.
Those key things you need to.
Yep. So pretty much consistent with the 6-month results, but I will run just a couple of big items that have jumped out at us. We still have a significant operating surplus, which is driven by a lot of grant revenue and subsidy revenue from Waka, Kotahi, and for the Sergeant Gallery. Our operating expenses are higher, driven from additional maintenance and emergency works and reinstatements in the roading space mostly. Capital expenditure is still below plan, but we've made significant progress over this last quarter, definitely more than we've done in previous quarters. And our gross debt remains low as well. So just to highlight, as I've mentioned, our subsidies are higher from Waka Kotahi. They've actually approved quite a significant amount of additional subsidies for emergency works from the weather events we've had over the last year or so. The Sergeant Gallery has also received quite a bit of grant funding in advance. We expect the next tranche to be in early end of this calendar year. Our operating costs are higher again, like I said, for emergency works in the roading space. Also to note that personnel costs, although they look to be higher on the face of the statements, that's driven from the splash centre, which has come in-house to council. If we exclude that, we're still well under budget, because we have a number of vacant roles that we're still trying to fill. Just a point of clarification on point number 24, page 36 of your reports, and the transportation activity. Our revenue is lower because we've received lower fees to date from lower utilisation. It's not a case of fees have been dropped. Moving on to capital expenditure, like I mentioned, we've spent 28.8 million to date. That's almost 13 million more than we did the previous quarter, so it's a significant improvement for us. The main projects remain the Sergeant Gallery redevelopment, the port redevelopment project. We expect those to proceed within the next calendar year as well. Moving on to debt, our gross debt remains the same, but our cash and cash equivalents have dropped a bit as we've spent quite a bit on capex over the last 3 quarters. We expect our debt to increase slightly to year end, but still well below what we budgeted. I'll now hand over to Louise to talk about the non-financials.
Thank you. Still writing notes. Just the key.
Could you move it just a little bit closer, Louise?
Right. Sure. Just the key points for the non-financial KPIs. You will note on the bar graph under point 4 that I don't, on my page numbers
Page
will be different.
32.
So number 4, and it's the non-financial KPIs by activity. Does show that 51% of the 77 KPIs have been met. Just note that there were 17 that we have noted are deemed not to have been met because the information wasn't available at the time that the report was compiled. We are satisfied that the results are on track and consistent with previous periods, and can assure you that it will be available for the end of the financial year reporting. There are a couple of targets also not met in the percentage of building consents and resource consents issued within the statutory timeframes, but we feel that that is going to be addressed because the resourcing issue has been addressed with some staff. What is pleasing is some of the results from some of the customer-facing venues. We've had numbers exceeded at the Sargent Gallery of visitors, despite the Eyesight Gallery having been closed since January 23. And the Opera House, a number of events, we didn't meet target because it actually is the number of events that we host, but if you take into consideration that the Phantom of the Opera actually booked out the whole theatre for a whole month. So perhaps that KPI we can look at addressing how we might measure that for the future LTP. I think that is all the key highlights. If you've got any questions on the attachment which goes through the non-financials, happy to try and answer those.
I have a first question, and it is around the way the report is put together. And the 17, measures were deemed to have been not met because the information wasn't available. And I'm wondering if there is another way we can perhaps treat those in the report. I think that would be quite helpful. Just identify them separately as opposed to them being lost in the not met category.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, absolutely. This was a matter that was discussed at our executive team meeting earlier this week. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough time to update the report, but we would like to split those measures out so that you can see which measures have been definitively met, which have been definitively failed, and which are still in progress, but we're lacking data to confirm a result. Some of those measures you need a full year's worth of data before you can confirm whether you have or have not met them. So we would like to present them as in progress rather than as fails, because I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by under-reporting our performance.
I have to 100% agree with that. Thank you. So we're on the same page. Councillor Rob.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not a great fan of the pretty pictures, so I'll move to page 40. And I note that the finance income has doubled for the period, more than doubled. And the finance costs have substantially reduced. I presume that's because we have got a lot of grant money and things maybe on deposit, and that we haven't drawn down loans maybe. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. There's two drivers to that. One is because we have a lot of grant revenue and subsidies in advance, so we're holding more cash and we're not borrowing as much as we usually do. So we're keeping some of that cash on term deposit. But also the other is around our swaps valuations. So with the increase in interest rates over the last 3 to 6 months, our swaps have actually inverted from going from a net liability to a net asset. So our swap rate is lower than the current floating rate. So that is reflected in actually reducing your finance expense and increasing your finance income. So it's a valuation movement on those.
Yeah. Perhaps to the Chief Executive, just reading this at face value, would there be a review of the methodology for the budget for this next annual plan? Are we overstating the cost of finance?
Through you, Madam Chair, the short answer to that, I think, is no. In preparing the annual plan, the team have done quite a bit of work in terms of forward forecasting what we're likely to deliver in our capital works program, and revise the opening debt balance accordingly, and factored in things like the current inflation interest rates to try and make it as accurate as possible with the information we have available at this point.
So this sort of information wouldn't trigger a review?
Through you, Madam Chair, at this stage, no, I don't have a cause to trigger a review of the work done to date. I think it's already adequately captured in the budgets that have been put together.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Pete.
Yes, you mentioned swaps. Can you give me a quick definition of what swaps are?
Through you, Madam Chair, sorry, it's a technical term we in the finance team use. I think it's the correct term is an interest rate swap instrument. So effectively it's a form of hedging where we agree in advance that we will fix an interest rate with someone and they will pay us the difference from whatever the floating rate at the time is. So usually done at a future date, be it 1 or 10, 15 years or whatever it is. And usually if the floating interest rate is lower, then we've got to pay them the difference. If the floating interest rate is higher, then they pay us the difference, hence where the valuations come from. So if the valuation, as it's currently done now, the floating interest rate goes above what our agreed swap rate is, then we basically get paid by the other party, and it reduces our finance cost. It's in our favour now, yes.
Mayor Andrew.
Oh, so yeah, look,
Well done, by the way, on the hop.
no, it's a great definition. So basically, the way I've understood swaps is they help manage risk and create greater certainty.
Yeah.
Yep. I've got a finance degree, but that's my basic definition of.
Okay, may I have a mover for this? Councillor Pete, second. Mayor Andrew, thank you very much. Any comments?
Yeah, we go.
Councillor Michael.
Yeah, it's a comment because I don't think it should be a question, but it kind of is a statement at the same time. I really enjoy this report. I read this with a glass of wine, and it's exciting, to be honest. But that's just my background. I'm sorry. However, moving forward, as we start to look at the metrics of what makes Whanganui successful, how do we define a great Whanganui, etc. Things like our resident satisfaction scores, people in education. We've looked about a lot of data points. I would like to see that in this report, as opposed to a separate report. I think when we start to look at that data points, they'll nicely mingle, because that's what I've been doing recently. I've been looking at this report, looking at your non-financials, and then I've been cross-referencing that against a net promoter score on Whanganui area news, for instance, and going, okay, well, how happy are people with Whanganui Council versus the non-financials versus the financials? And it's a good reference point. So I think it's a point to push forward when we start looking at that strategy and the vision of Whanganui, and then the metrics of how well we're actually doing. I'd love that to be inside here later on.
Thank you. Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, mine's just in response to Councillor Michael's comment, which I actually agree with. I think key performance indicators are just that. They're key performance indicators, not a whole bunch of numbers, and we should. But I do think there's an opportunity from now to 30 June next year, this runway that I talk about, to develop a vision and strategy for Whanganui with some clear key performance indicators that cover the four well-beings: environmental, social, cultural and economic. So I guess I'm supporting what Michael says, and ultimately we're here for our people, for our community, and we should be able to measure the great lifestyle that we've got amongst other things. So yeah, great.
Councillor Philippa.
Thank you. I guess my comment is just I'm particularly thanking this Chief Executive for answering the question by the colleague here around finance costs. it's not my, you know, it's, yeah, I haven't got my head all over that, but what I'm, can, you know, at the end of the day, knowing the cost of what we're trying to achieve in each year as we go forward into our next annual plan and setting our rates, it's really important that we understand if we, you know, if we're setting our rate, what we're setting in our rates is what we expect to spend. And I guess we seem, you know, this kind of underspend we tend to have, particularly in capital expenditure, I kind of always concerns me a little bit, but, you know, understanding these significant projects, the Sargent Gallery and the port, and I guess obviously the Sargent Galleries in particular, ramping up, then, you know, I just encourage the finance team really to continue that scrutiny so that we set the cost of this council and the cost into the rates we're setting forward, rather than we, you know, keep coming forward with these underspends. And to me, it's like we, you know, the whole issue of are we overrating our community? So I'm hearing we're not. I'm hearing that it gets continually scrutinised, and that, you know, because we have got a significant, the biggest rate increase I've ever seen on my, I don't know, 16 plus years on council, at this 8.2 average, and an evaluation year that's going to really hit people, you know, apart from a few other things. So, but I appreciate the question, I appreciate the answer, and encourage our whole finance team in particular to basically ensure we go forward into our annual plan deliberations with knowing the cost of providing services as truly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to Wihan and Louise for all the work that you know you put into getting this report to us, and the absolute joy that you give Councillor Michael when he's reading it. So, thank you. I will now put the motion that the Operations and Performance Committee receives the report third quarter financial and non-financial results for the 9 months ending 31 March 2023. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. And we are now, I do believe, up to our last agenda item, 5.5, Capital Project Status Reports Update. Sarah, we invite you to the table again. No, not in the dock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I suggest the approach today? We go through each status report, project manager by project manager, with questions for the project managers while they're at the table, and then
Yes.
Yep. Cool. So, Gay, come on.
Can we do it in the order that it's in the agenda as well? That'd be really great.
Okay. Oh, okay. So which one was first?
Sargent Gallery.
Yep. Come on up, Gay.
Welcome. Welcome in person.
Thank you. All right, so just looking at the changes, if we look at the top in terms of progress, we've moved to resolve our resourcing issue. So we've moved into the orange in terms of resourcing, from orange, I should say, into the green, with information that we now have a full workforce complement. And in terms of activities and progress, we've settled on the final design for the Waka Air Bridge, which will be carved by Te Runanga o Tupaho, and we're moving forward with our search for the cafe operator. However, we continue to have potential cost and scheduling risks, and I would say here that we've had 2 subs go into liquidation during the period, both entirely unexpected. The second being a more complex trade and just at the end of the early stage of installation. So this trade being on the critical path, it does concern us in regards to the potential impact on program. However, I can report that there's been very good progress with both. Our steel trade has been, we have an alternative now in place, and the progress is that we are looking, or Macmillan's are looking to bring on board the redundant personnel from the actual the original contractor, so there's some good continuity there, and so they're making some changes. So that's good in terms of that progress. Going forward, we're now starting to work on coordinating post-construction activities into the project timeline. So an opening program and event calendar can be developed. So it's not all about a construction end date. We're looking to look into the transition and what programming activities need to happen. Certainly once possession of the facilities take place, we've got the fitting out of the building, settling and testing of facilities such as the lights, HVAC, security and digital systems, and population of each space, stocking the retail shop and setting up the new cafe operator, and of course the installation of the first exhibition, which all takes careful programming. So we're starting to look to dovetail that. It's not the matter of the contractor at the end of construction completion just rolls up the sleeves and vacates. There's often a transitional process there, and so we're looking to perhaps start reporting in terms of this contract here. I've got project completion. Maybe we could start looking at an opening rather than a construction. Just talk about construction completion because that's perhaps more relevant here. In terms of that, looking at what activities there are, one of the things we've done is developed a prospectus for our cafe search, and you may have recently seen some media releases about our search, and there's been some good feedback already. We've got some interest from local proprietors within the area, and they're looking to come and have a look through. And we've also, in terms of that progress, looked to develop a video that celebrates the teamwork and the whole project, which I've asked to be shared with this meeting today. So that concludes my comments.
We have some thank you, Gay. We have some questions. Councillor Kate. Thank you. Thanks, Gay, for the report and your ongoing work related to the Sergeant. My question's around the structural steel and the HVAC aspects of the project. I guess you've identified it as progress and also as a risk that those two parts of the project are on the critical path, and that there is a risk to the completion date. When will we know whether the completion date is going to be the completion date?
That's a very good question. It's something that we've put to the contractor. Their focus has been to simply get another sub-trade on board and get them bedded in. So that's happened really well with the steel contractor. We're not hearing anything in terms of a delay to program in terms of steel. However, our concern with regard to the HVAC is, I think, real, given that it is on critical path and so many of the other services trades need to work around that. So it's an intensive focus at the moment to look at the program to end, so that we can, rather than focus on extensions of time or changes that have happened, and that's often more about getting a reimbursement of cost, we want to know the program to end. So once that new sub-trade is fully on board, we'll have more information. But at this point, I don't know, other than my gut feeling that it is likely to have a delay.
So when will we know?
What's this next report? A couple of months, I would say. We will have more of a firm program. Yeah, which is why we're wanting to say, well, okay, that could be that we'll finish the new wing, and we could potentially start onboarding and moving in that facilitation of that fit out in that area, and so the areas that, rather than having a straight line and then the fit out program follow, we'd like to perhaps start integrating and dovetailing. So.
Yeah, no, I get that, thank you. I guess my concern is that the opportunity for further cost escalation, the longer the project goes on, we know that the more it will cost.
And
you're saying it will be a couple of months before we actually understand that?
To have a full program, yes.
Thank you.
Can I just
Yes, please.
perhaps add a little to that? So the discipline that the project team has fallen into over the last, well, stepped into, I should say, over the last probably 12 months is biennial or bi-monthly reviews of the budget. And last year we moved from having one figure that we were reporting on to that envelope figure, where we've had a couple of iterations of that review. One was just last month, and the reporting that you're seeing in front of you now reflects that. We are still sitting within our envelope, so we haven't gone outside of that. And of course, if we were looking like we were, then we would be bringing that back to this table.
Councillor Rob.
Thank you. Just with the cafe operator, does the contract allow for the fit out, or does the lessee do their own fit out?
The latter, the lessee. That's the intent. So it'll be a shell. They'll have all the services provided, but it's for them to come in and put in their own counter and tables and chairs, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you. My question is also about the cafe. I come from a hospitality background, but I got an email early this morning from somebody who asked me to ask this question, which I like to do. The cafe tender request suggests that the kitchen aspect is off-site, so to speak. It's not a full cafe. That the items are to be brought into the cafe as opposed to start and finish in a full premises. Is that correct? And if so, why is that so, was the question.
Okay, so it was very clear from the start that we didn't want a big vat and deep fryers and a full restaurant style or cooking facility. It's a warm and serve, which is actually, we're finding, well, certainly our agent has found that that's a common practice now, where you'll perhaps have an operator that has an off-site premises where they would do more detailed food preparation, or maybe has a number of businesses, and they would bring in the food that would then just be heated and served. There is a small kitchen under the old gallery where there is room to store dry goods and freezer and fridge facilities, but it is the intent that the operator would be, it's a heat and serve rather than the deep fry. It's really about the HVAC systems. We didn't want fatty, smelly food smells within the gallery. It also has an implication on insurance and all sorts of other things in terms of operating a facility with a full-blown restaurant.
If I might, does that also refer to like a firewall? If it's a heat and serve situation, you don't need a firewall?
Well, certainly the cafe will be its own fire cell in terms of defining what has to be where. So those things have all been considered in terms of the HVAC systems and venting and what controls we have in place for the servery, that is the cafe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, thank you for your, this report. Probably three kind of questions. I'll start with the cafes, and just to understand. So it's a shell. There's the capital fit out as a cost involved in the Sargent capital project, but with the operator, just understand that'll be a cost to them. And would they operationally are they in charge? You know, is there any operational ongoing cost around the cafe, or are they expected to be? Sorry, what's the word? You know, it's a business. It's their business model. Someone's interested. They're going to come forward. They're going to pay for the capital to fully, you know, to set up the cafe, apart from the basic shell, and it's going to be operationally cost neutral to the Sargent going forward on operating, you know, to the Sargent costs going forward operationally.
There are a number of opportunities that you've listed there, whether or not it's a percentage of profit, whether it's a lease or rental holiday. There's a number of avenues that the council can explore, and certainly Sarah's fully involved with that. We want to attract the right operator, and so often those right operators might not have deep pockets. So there are various opportunities that we would look at, and we will be looking to get the right operator and the right business model. Sarah?
To follow on from that, so the first principle was we need to get an operator because we've got a cafe there, and then we work through the detail of the business model. But at a high level, the model is that they come in and fit it out, so it's their business. We've got some levers through the lease arrangement that can incentivise some businesses into that space, and we've been clear through the process with First Retail that we will consider any of those options when and as we need to. So it's not quite as cut and dried as the question was framed. So priority is to get the right operator with a sustainable business model where they have a business that's viable.
Okay, but just real briefly, there's a possibility that it could have some ongoing operational added costs to the whole Sargent project and possibly even capital. That's a possibility, is it?
Actually, I don't think there'll be ongoing operational costs. There just might be, for example, we might reduce the lease if we need to incentivise people in. Yeah. So the business model needs to be viable. That's why we have got quite an open mind moving into this process.
Okay, thank you. Just moving on to, I'll go on to the capital. It has been asked, I didn't quite understand part of the answer question. Look, we're going obviously forward into our annual plan deliberation shortly. We have got 14.6 million rates impact, well, whatever rates, debt impact in this 2023-24 plan, up from the original 5. So I guess my question is, I mean, in that commentary, we do actually say in that commentary that council's contribution of 14.6 million may be reduced if donors and the Sargent Trust is successful. So we've got to make those decisions shortly. We're faced with an average 8.2 rates impact. At this stage, does it look like that $14.6 million may be reduced? Is there a reduced? And the other side of that, looking at some of those risks of this 67.4 million we're talking about in the annual plan. That's which is roughly around this midpoint level you're talking about here. I guess is this the risk with some of these unfortunate things that have also happened? How confident are you that what we've committed at 65 million, I think I'm reading at the moment, 65.5. Which side of the risk register are we looking to be on? No more impact to the ratepayers than what we're factoring, or probably more impact going forward?
So the risk, the high, medium, low, at the high end we have the 71. So the mid and the review that we've just done a couple of weeks ago was still sitting at the 67. I do think that the 71 is the value that is being put in for the 14.6. So I think we have the high end risk that's gone on there. I'm not sure.
Can we get that answered, please?
Through you, Madam Chair, from memory, I think we budgeted based on the midpoint range of the risk for the annual plan.
Yep.
To answer your question, there is no guarantees that can be given by the project team. It's why it's still prudent to provide you with that envelope rather than giving a misleading sense of security by an overly precise figure. From my point of view, I think the team are doing a really good job in terms of managing the ongoing risk. We're still working actively with the trust. They're putting a lot of effort into fundraising for us. We've seen recently the large sums of money bequeathed to both the council and the trust from estates. We've had the Better Off funding. All of those things will be reducing the ratepayers' contribution towards this project, and we'll continue to put effort into those things alongside the trust's fundraising efforts to minimise the ratepayers' contribution, whilst also in parallel putting a lot of effort into minimising the cost of the project. I know a lot of work has been done by the project team and the QSing team in terms of challenging and putting due diligence and scrutiny over variations from the contractors and making sure that we minimise those liabilities by getting variations and claims signed off promptly and for as low a possible cost as we can achieve. But
Thank
no
you.
guarantees.
Yeah, but with all that, what you've said, including my understanding is what we've put into the annual plan, this annual plan coming into, the 14.6, the Better Off funding, the bequests you've talked about, none of that is new. That's still sitting us at this midpoint of, sorry, that's sitting at this midpoint of $67 odd million, and that's what we've built into this. That's where we're at now. It would be any extra fundraising that may reduce that cost, and then there's
Yes.
a risk of capital. There's a risk identified in the project about delays that could increase the capital cost.
Yes. Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that's what I've just said. The efforts to try and continue fundraising will be ongoing, and if we're successful, that will reduce the ratepayers' contribution further. But there are still residual risks, and as you see, the team have priced up the risk register and the risk profile for the project as it sits today. And the worst case scenario, if we get a lot of risk realised, could push the project up into the $71 million mark. But at this point in time, our expectation is the most likely outcome is closer to the midpoint. We've budgeted accordingly. You do need to be conscious of the fact that if risk is realised, then we would have to provide further budget to complete the project. But at this point in time, all efforts are going into nursing this project through to a really good, or as best a possible financial outcome as we can manage.
Thank you, David. If that 71 plus million, or about 71, is where we end up, or is it whatever, slide slightly on under or over, when would it be expected that council would be faced with that decision? Is it long-term plan? Is it somewhere in between the annual plan and the long-term plan? Have we got any real timeline around about? Obviously, we've got contractors that need to be paid as they do the work.
So, through you, Madam Chair, the likely scenario there is you would get continued progress updates through these committees. The project is forecast to be completed at the end of this calendar year, so it would fall into next financial year. So it would land after you've struck the rates, but before you've got into the long-term plan. So if necessary, I would imagine that you would be getting a report from the project team with a request for some additional unbudgeted debt expenditure.
Thank you. Going off that question, my last question is just actually on the sergeant on the key, and I don't know if that can be answered and if it can't be answered today, but just in brief, my understanding, and I could have this wrong, a developer perhaps bought that building, we paid for the fit out, the council paid for the fit out, and we paid for the first 5 years of rent. So kind of two questions. We seem to be well past the 5 years of rent. We've been inside on the key a lot longer, but is that the rent on that? I mean, there was 2.2 million to fit out all that building, I believe, and we got about 400,000 from lotteries. But the extra rent plus the 5 years, is that just factored into the normal OPEX of the or operating cost of the sergeant? That's my first question.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would just need to double check with our finance team, but I think the answer to that is yes, it's just part of the operating cost budget for the sergeant.
Thank you. And if you could check, that'd be great. Thank you, Dave. And the second one is just, what is the plan for that? I mean, if I'm right, we don't own that building. We're just going to exit it. And is that correct? And sorry, all that fit out, some of that is being used in the sergeant, the redeveloped sergeant? All the fit out that happens, Sergeant, on the quay, is any of that being moved, you know, all the stuff to look after the collection, which was quite significant?
So I can certainly answer the last piece of that,
Yep.
in that all of the very specialised racks and that system will be transferred into the new collection store and used, most certainly. The front of house, the retail, as you might appreciate, it's a different shape, so it's had a limited ability for it to be shifted across. However, any furnishings and tables and facilities, they're looking at that right now as in terms of an inventory of exactly what's needed so that we minimise our fit out and what's needed to be spent for the new facilities. And I understand the last of the exhibitions will be this month.
Yeah. In regard to the actual building, can we just get clarity? Who owns the building, and what is the? You know, we just simply exit it, take what we want, or do we own the building?
No, we don't own it.
Okay, so we are just we're renting.
The leases expire.
Lease expires. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next questions are from Councillor Michael.
Hello. Cafe. Did we go to the customer segmentation that is most likely to use the art gallery and ask them what type of cafe they wanted?
Did we go to the? I'm sorry, I missed that.
The customer segmentation that is most likely to use the art gallery. Did we ask them their view on what cafe they wanted?
The cafe style.
Well,
are you meaning?
I don't. Yeah. I won't go to a place that just like heats my pie and gives me a Coke. I like a nice cafe. And I'm presuming, being presumptuous here, people who go to art galleries are far more well-to-do than I am, and they would rather go to Mint. So are we missing an opportunity by not asking the customers what type of cafe they want, and therefore find the right partner for that?
So what we're doing is we have engaged First Retail. They are a specialist organisation to attract businesses to these sorts of venues and others. So what I would like to say there is that they know their onions in terms of what sort of cafe will match the patronage, the customer that's going to the art gallery. And so we mentioned earlier that it most certainly needs to be the right sort of business with the right food and environment and ambience to attract the right customers that are there. Similarly, one of the objectives is to create it as a bit of a destination with the hope that the cafe as well as the art attracts more people into the facility. So there's that balancing act. So we've trusted the experts on that one, Michael.
And there'll be no pies and chips.
Coke, no Coke either. Councillor Josh.
Thank you. Hopefully a quick one from me. Just around the two subcontractors that went into liquidation, I'm wanting to understand the future risks around this potentially happening again at another critical point. Do you have oversight over the other contractors, and are you relatively comfortable that they're all, you know, where they should be?
Well, I'd have to say it was, particularly with the HVAC supplier, it was a complete surprise, and it was really their Australian parent that put the New Zealand subsidiary into liquidation. It's something we've looked at. We've thought about who else might be there. We've asked our main contractor to look at that, and if there's, you know, in terms of we make sure our payments are prompt, everything is up to date, and it certainly was one of the feedback we got for the steel from the liquidator, that because Macmillan had already always paid up to date and on time, we were given good access to our supplies, and so they were prioritised in terms of that experience. But as to whom else, we hope no others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. My comment around the report is that for something as large and complex, and we're getting to the gnarly end of the project as well, as everything comes together, I don't think that the dashboard is an adequate report to council. I'd like to see, and I have asked for this before, I'd like to see a 1 or 2 pager that comes with it. So not a great huge long thing, but just some summary report that details a lot more of that stuff. So this doesn't enable you to go into a bit more detail. It may reduce the number of questions around the room, but it just informs people. Because I think if you read the dashboard in isolation, it can actually raise more questions than it answers. So, David.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that question has been asked before and is noted. As I've mentioned before, we are slowly building, as part of our project management methodology, a suite of reports. I think, though it is timely for us maybe to bring at the next meeting a more in-depth report. My preference is not to be providing in-depth reports at every single committee meeting just because of the work burden required, but if we can provide a blend between dashboards and then periodic deep dive reports, happy to do so.
Thank you. Particularly for this project. Thank you very much.
Moving on to the velodrome, you've just got me again today because unfortunately Rosemary is unwell. The key change here is we still haven't got the crew in the country. But what I can share with you, since this report was printed and distributed to you, was that the container of tools, over $1 million worth of tools, has arrived in town. It arrived earlier this week, and we had notification yesterday from VeloTrack that their visa applications are now being processed. They lodged their visa applications some 10 weeks ago and had not been able to get any level of specificity from MB around whether they were being actioned or still sitting in the queue. So that's positive news, just received yesterday actually. From VeloTrack that they are now being processed. VeloTrack continue to provide us with confidence that they will be here this year. We will not bleed into the next financial year. They will make a start this year. In fact, they've said that they will be on the plane the day after the visas are issued. So that's where we're at with the progress. It's disappointing that we haven't made the progress that we would rather, but there are really reasons outside of our control. While all of that is underway, we are working actively with various stakeholders around, as I mentioned the last time, getting the velodrome back on the map, so to speak. That has sort of come to a bit of a standstill because until we know when we're going to have the track open, there's only so much forward planning that we are able to do. But everybody's poised and ready and waiting. I have agreed with the customer services team, the venues and events team, the booking model, and we've got some discussion to have with the stakeholders and the community groups around pricing models and so forth. So we are making progress in having an operational track once it's ready to be operational. So I'll try my best at any questions, answering any questions.
Councillor Philippa, can you please be a bit more precise, with a bit more precision with your questions, because they're taking a long period of time to actually get each question out.
Just because I'm giving information at the same time.
Yes.
But thank you, Chair. Thanks, Sarah. You may have said it, sorry, but just the risk of delay in visas, and the risk of weather deteriorating. I know it was scheduled to be done in March, April, our best months, and now we've got a risk of weather and they can't work on steep tracks in the rain. So where does that risk fall? Stuff is landed, they get their visa, they turn up here and it rains for a month. what's the plan, and who's going to pay if you know, if they have to be here longer, etc.
So we have every confidence. So Velotrack are professional velodrome installers. Number one, any contract and any contractor is required to have, you know, we need to see their health and safety plan once they're on site and be satisfied with that health and safety plan. Those two things put together, I think, can provide us with a good level of assurance that they're working on the mitigations of any risks with respect to the weather. Yeah, March and April are our best months, but hey, we've had more rain in the first 4 months of this year than perhaps we normally get in the winter period. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. It may mean that the program, that the installation takes a little bit longer than ideal, but we won't know that until it happens, until it rains, in fact.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little bit surprised that you saw when they get here, we have then we understand their health and safety plan, but would we not, yeah, I just, ratepayers' money, obviously, again, yeah, don't we need to have a bit better, sorry, surely we know where the risk is going to fall. If the project is, if they have to be here longer, they're going to be living here longer.
Can I ask the question?
Yeah, I just...
David would like to respond, I think.
Can I just ask the question? I think it's, if they stay longer, if it takes longer, who pays?
Yeah, that's...
Is it a fixed price contract? What is the nature of the contract?
So, through you, Madam Chair, the price that we have is a fixed price contract. A normal practice in these kind of things is that it is the expectation that our contractors would price in risk for time delays, for normal, typical seasonal weather. So they would have to come back to us and prove something was truly exceptional, way over and above what would be reasonable for them to price when they were tendering for the work.
And just to pick up the health and safety aspect, they have a health and safety plan already, so it's not like we're waiting for them to arrive and then have it. And the operators they know the track, they've seen the track, so they know what they're working with.
Okay. Yeah, and last question will be, is just Sport and Recreation Advisory Group is kicking off today. It's been, this project has been reported to previously. Certainly I've had no visibility over recent happenings with the velodrome. And would you expect that the Sport and Recreation Advisory Group will get kind of in the first place informed or being part of that whole stakeholder group, I would hope, not just about the build and any delays, but just also in regard to kind of operationalising this once it's built, to increase usage and opportunities with other stakeholders.
Through you, Madam Chair, as the lead officer on the advisory group, I might answer this one. First of all, I think just to clarify, visibility over this project has been reported to this committee for, I think, 3 or 4 cycles now. But in terms of answering your question directly, I can't see any reason why the advisory group and the membership there could not be involved in a little bit of a greater level of detail than this committee. It fits with its purpose in terms of reference, so I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to just let everyone know too, just to stay back after the committee closes. Next item.
Thank you. So the next report is curbside recycling. We have Trish joining to give you the update there.
Kia ora koutou.
Welcome.
So, progress made since the report, so you've all seen the report. We've been working on the food scraps trial, so we've got a little bit more information to share. And that, we'll be looking at starting the food scraps trial on the 1st of August. We've got about 400 households that we will be having participate in the trial across various deprivation areas of Whanganui. And the trial will run for a 3-month period of time. We will be able to test different methodologies and comms. We'll look to having a marketing campaign leading up to the trial just to raise awareness about food scraps, and some community sessions with people in the communities where the trial will be happening. And we're just currently in the process of developing the collateral for the trial. For the curbside recycling contract, it's in the negotiation phase, with a view to having a recommendation to council by the end of June. Once again, because it's still in the negotiation phase, it is the contract itself is of a sensitive nature, and so there's not a lot more information we can share at this point.
Thank you. There is a question. Councillor Kate.
You just used, thank you for the update, trial collateral. What does that mean?
So this is just the marketing information, so what can and can't be used in the trial. We're trying surveys, pre and post surveys, just setting up a website specifically around behaviours for curbside or for food scraps practice. So just marketing and different collateral that we'll be using for that trial.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's it. No more questions. Thank you very much. Look forward to the next update when you've sorted out tenders, etc.
Thank you.
And lastly, we've got Denise to chat about Streets for People. So we've heard a little bit about this today already from our partners, Horizons and Kotahi. But there's been a bit going on with this project since you last heard from us. So welcome, Denise.
Yes. Since this report was done, at the time I wrote it, we were planning on doing some workshops, and we would like, the project team has asked me to thank the elected members for coming to the reveal workshop that we ran for you. It was very good to actually find out what you thought of the plans. The workshops, we got a lot of feedback, which we are now looking at our draft concepts to see what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be changed, what needs to be rethought. As far as work, we are working on our camera data. So we now know how many cars go through the Wicksteed-Guyton Street intersection. We know how many pedestrians, how many cyclists, and we also know how they use it. We actually got tracking lines, which is interesting, the number of cyclists that prefer the footpath to the road. We've also got similar data for Lower Victoria, Lewis and Hills, and at the moment we're just working through what our options are there, and we'll be having meetings with the major stakeholder of Trafalgar Square to discuss what we would like to do. So hopefully at the next meeting we will be able to report back on those changes.
Thank you. No questions?
Ooh, yes.
Oh, we do. Councillor Pete?
At the bottom of your report under risks, I think it is, that we are looking at resources currently in storage which were planned for Lower Victoria Avenue. Does that now mean that the Lower Victoria Avenue project is dead?
The Lower Victoria project is, for the majority of intents and purposes, dead. If it was going to be re-looked at, it would be a completely new project. It would not be a revival of what was tried previously. We're looking at the fact that it's approximately $250,000 worth of decking, planters, seating that's just sitting in a yard at the moment not being used. And being aware, as Councillor Philippa has pointed out, is a high rates increase being looked at, we looked at and said, well, if we can reuse, let's reuse. Councillors will actually see some of the planters very shortly adjacent to the council building. The concrete planters need replacing, and we're going to be repurposing those planters there. They're just deteriorating sitting in a yard. But if Victoria Avenue was to be re-looked at, it will be a completely new project.
Sorry to hear it.
Yeah, it is extremely sad, but it's the reality. Thank you very much for that report. It's very, very, very thorough. Thank you. There are no questions. Therefore, I ask for a mover and seconder for that report. Mover, Councillor Pate, seconder, Councillor Ross. Do we have any comments? There doesn't appear so. I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, folk. That was a good, quick ending, wasn't it? I'm going to close the hui with a karakia. E oha ki runga ki a Whanganui, e oha ki raro ki a Papatuanuku. Whakatairanga te kupu, te kōrero, te mahi, ki te pō o te ware. Hei tuanga he mahi a muri. Ka puta ki te wai ao, ki te ao marama. Homie, huie, tai ki e. I acknowledge, greet those things above, the sky, universe and the heavens. I acknowledge, greet those things below, the earth in all its entirety. Let's suspend the words, discussion, debate, negotiations, the work covered to the pillar of the house as a treasure, a point of importance to be revisited at a later time, so we may enter into enlightenment. Let it be bound and fixed. Yes, fixed. Let it be agreed by all. Thank you. Could you